Hi everyone, welcome to News Night, the topical news hour. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome to our talk today on cross-functional collaboration and how we achieve that in Condé Nast. First of all, hello, my name's Luke. I'm the Senior User Experience Researcher at Condé Nast. And I'm collaborating with, yes, I'm laying it on thick, collaborating with my colleagues who are 3 talented designers. Now I'm going to let them introduce themselves shortly as they go through some case studies. But first, a little context setting. So, what is collaboration? Well, Merriam-Webster defines it as to work jointly with others or together, especially in an intellectual endeavor, or to cooperate willingly or willingly assist. Maybe let's leave that one. But shout out to Merriam-Webster Dictionary and its more forceful interpretation of collaboration. What does it mean in business? So collaboration is a working practice whereby individuals work together for a common purpose to achieve business benefit. Now what's important to note for this in an organization is it's directed. People have a natural tendency to collaborate, but in an organization you want to direct that need to working practices. So methods and process to make sure that you achieve tasks and ultimately achieve your goals. Next involves people. Collaboration between machines, simple. People are complicated. We've an incredibly complicated way of communicating. For example, only 10% of communication is verbal, as demonstrated by my jazz hands. So what you need to do is basically account for that because people have their own social bonds. They will have their own agendas and perspectives that will color collaboration. In other words, collaboration and good collaboration takes a lot of work. Now again, framing it in a business way, it has to be framed around a clear business reason or need. That is your North Star. So as you're learning to work together and all move towards the same goal and outcome, you use that to steer you in the right direction. So remember, none of us is as smart as all of us. Now, the power of cross-functional collaboration lies in the fact that it brings together diverse skills, perspectives, and expertise from different areas in the organization. What are the benefits? Well, they're numerous. So, firstly, bringing people together sparks innovation and creativity. It leads to more comprehensive and effective problem solving, and also better decision making. It also makes better use of time and resources. Collaborative teams are also more fluid and flexible in the face of changes and challenges, not just to the project, but in terms of the organization. It also reduces misunderstanding and fosters a greater sense of shared understanding of the business goals and objectives. Also, it gives you a holistic overview of what the user's needs and goals are, which obviously as a UX researcher is something I champion. And finally, it fosters, second last, it also fosters learning and encourages skill transfer between different specialisms within the business, which of course, as a cumulative effect, leads to the idea that everyone's more engaged and therefore has greater job satisfaction. Now, in the Condé Nast technology lens, let's step back for a moment and look at our world. So we wear a lot of hats. So at Condé Nast, designers assume a multitude of roles. Your principal role could be a product designer, but you also have to be a UX researcher, interaction designer, design level specialist, etc. We're visual storytellers, but we also have to be strategic problem solvers. We stay up to date with the latest trends and technologies. We're also innovators and pioneers in the ever-evolving world of digital and print media. So basically that translates to a really big walk-in closet of hats in our office. It's first come, first serve though, so I tend to favor the beret, but given this summer has been never-ending winter, the beanie is a solid second choice. We're also a house of brands, so that means we have over 20 plus unique brands. What that translates to is an awful lot of user audiences with unique bespoke user needs and goals. We have to engage with different tools across different mediums like print, web, app. This means a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of roadmaps, branding guidelines, and of course, design requirements. So we also have to be user-centered. Look, the digital landscape, as we all know, evolves rapidly, and so do users' expectations in tandem. So basically for us, it's not just crucial, but imperative to our success that we're not just reactive, but proactive in understanding and meeting those user needs. Print heritage. So we have a long-standing print heritage. Good, the video's playing. We have a long-standing print heritage. Some of our brands like Vogue and The New Yorker have been in print since the 1900s. So when we design digital experiences, we're always considering if our work will basically have a presence in that print, and if so, how we might map it to two very different mediums. Print, and that brings me nicely to my next point, multimedia. So on the other side of the spectrum, we've a plethora of ways the user can engage with us. They can change their digital landscape, swap devices. So when we're designing, we always need to consider a range of devices, screen sizes, interactions, and of course methods of interaction. So that can include things like mouse and keyboard, screen reader, touch, and of course in accessibility, as I just mentioned, screen reader is important. So you have to think of all those things and account for them in a digital landscape. We're very global. So we have offices in the US, Europe, the UK, India. So we face big challenges at Condé Nast, basically due to our global reach. We have teams spread worldwide, so we have to overcome challenges with communication, time zones, and cultural differences. It's quite tough to schedule meetings when New York wakes up as Bangalore is leaving the office. So that basically means we really have to leverage what we call the golden hour, which is a very small sliver in the Venn diagram when we're all working at the same time. As a global company, we also have to deal with diverse customer needs and cultural complexities. We're constantly faced with the contrasting needs of local versus global markets. So beyond time zones, we're also having to look at eras or horizons. We need to think about different states of time, basically. So the present, the near future, and the long-term future. We have to navigate constant change and exploration while staying grounded in the present. Who knew the job description also included time travel? Luckily, we have an in with Doctor Who, and he lets us borrow his TARDIS from time to time. So yes, beyond our many design hats, we have a lot of challenges to deal with and a lot of things to overcome, essentially. So back to collaboration. One way to ensure success in the mess, we'll say, is the power of collaboration, but it boils down to finding the sweet spot. If we pull too far the other way, it's merely coexistence. It's just a bunch of strangers in the office with you. If we go too far to the right, we risk collision. Too many cooks, infringing on each other with opinions, slows down efficiency. That's no good. So one way we navigate and figure out the kind of sweet spot in collaboration is the Condé Code. Now, I don't work for recruitment, so I promise it's not a spiel to get you all to join the company, but let me just briefly introduce you to it. So our code defines our purpose as part of our ecosystem. It serves as an aspirational vision of how we will evolve and grow, basically, as a company. Now, what I want to do, without going into too much detail, is briefly just talk you through the 6 principles. Because I think you'll notice just from the words alone on the screen that collaboration is woven into the fabric of our guidelines. I'm aware, coming from a company that has Vogue, using a fashion analogy is a little on the nose, but bear with me. So, championing all voices. Exemplary doesn't mean exclusionary. One of your greatest strengths can be when you combine diverse specialisms, diverse perspectives, and skill sets. Being curious, well, one way to satiate that curiosity is obviously to collaborate with either external stakeholders like users or internal stakeholders and learn more from them. Focusing on tomorrow, I'm not going to talk about this now, but I did mention earlier about being a time traveler, and spoiler alert, one of our case studies later, in fact, probably all of them, will talk about this future thinking. Staying inspired, I think that speaks for itself. Again, obviously I mentioned sparks innovation, creativity, that will inspire you. Earning trust. So trust isn't something you can demand. It's one of the hardest earned things in a company, but when you do earn that trust of your colleagues, the work you make together will shine brighter, it will go further. Basically, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I knew I'd get that wrong. And finally, we have worked together, which is another way of saying collaboration. So now I've kind of given you those 6 principles that we use to help steer us. I'm going to hand it over to Elia, who is going to basically demonstrate how we put those principles into action and talk us through how collaboration was key to the success of a GQ Man of the Year project. So take it away, Elia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Luke. Hello, everyone. I'm Elia. I'm a senior product designer at Condé, and I'm Italian as well. I can accept jokes about last night game, but please keep them for the after drinks. Thank you. As Luke introduced, Condé Nast is famous for its brands and for its magazines, but it's also a name often associated to big events and unforgettable nights. And today, I want to talk to you about one of those fabulous events, and how we use effectively collaboration to work against our hard deadline. But before we jump into the details, let me give you a little context. So GQ Man of the Year is the Oscars of the GQ calendar. So every year across our 11 operated markets, we gather to celebrate the brightest stars in entertainment, fashion, and sports. To name a few, Stormzy, Max Verstappen, Zoe Kravitz. These were some of the stars we honored in the last couple of years. Well, here's the plot twist. Until 2 years ago, we had zero dedicated web coverage of the event. And so the only way you have to access the content was through a blank tag page, like the one you see there. So it wasn't the right stage for the quality of offer we had. So we had a clear mission. So how can we create an immersive web experience for the GQ Man of the Year ceremony? There was one little thing to consider. We had to do it in under 5 sprints, which is roughly 2 months for the ones who are not familiar with Agile. Quite pressure, right? So where do we start? We are a distributed team. We have a lot of departments that need to be involved. We need to be able to find that middle ground. We need to be able to have everyone involved in the project. We need to have something that can be shared and where everyone can contribute to. So how can we make sure we are on the same page? Well, as simple as it seems, this tool was a very lifesaver, a game changer. Having a rolling document where we keep track of all the information we needed for the project, all the guides, and guide us, our conversation, both in person and asynchronous. Here we collected all the doubts and questions we had, and we agreed on what it needed to be done in order to success. One key point about this little tool is that it was easily accessible and it didn't require a steep learning curve. And it's something that we need to consider when you need to go fast, and especially when you are interfacing with a lot of people that maybe are not familiar with our design tools, Figma or else. So you need to be sure you are as simple as possible. So because of that, we were able to gather crucial insights, working with different departments, such as who is our audience, what do they do on our website, why they engage with us, what content are we producing, is there anything that we need to consider from an art direction perspective, are we producing images or videos, are they portrait or landscape, these kind of things. And also, what's our tech stack? How can we leverage our design system? Is there any technical limitation? How can we overcome that limitation? Can we overcome the limitation in the time frame we have? And so we were able to define what was feasible and what wasn't. So for example, a takeover of the daily newsletter or the shoppable recommendations. Because of all the information we gathered and all the collaboration we had, we were confident in jumping into the ideation process. And here I want to give a big shout out to our content design team. This tool is called Priority Guides, and it's where we started. It's essentially like a boilerplate, a template that helps you focus on the structure and the flow of the content without being distracted by the aesthetics too early in the process. And so we were able to make sure that the content was still the king in our very Condé Nast fashion. So big shout out to the content design system, to the content design team again. Next, we iterated through mid to lo-fi wireframes. In this case, we heavily rely on our design system and our pattern book that allows us to be consistent and deliver qualitative work with an eye on accessibility. In this case, a huge kudos to the platform team, which is always delivering the tools to excel. So by embracing all the knowledge that we had in this process, we were able to quickly iterate from the rough sketches to the shippable product in no time. And here you can see where we get from and where we came from, where we get to and where we came from. So it didn't happen overnight. Of course, this is a result of a continuous cooperation between all the parts involved in the project, from product to commercial, whether in India, Spain, or UK. We had frequent syncs, weekly, even daily, at the last stages of the project. And everyone played an important role in the success of this project. You might recognize this quote, it's very familiar. So, talent wins games, but teamwork wins championships. I did want to include that quote. And that's exactly what happened. So our collaborative efforts actually paid off, and the new web experience reached high-time level of traffic and engagement. And it was so good that we decided to adopt the template for all our major events across the world. So it was true testament of the power of teamwork and the importance of having a clear and shared vision. This was actually my first project in Condé Nast. It was a newbie at the time, and I actually learned a lot. But I want you to remember this for today. Try to involve your stakeholders from the very beginning, and don't underestimate the power of your toolkit. Even like a simple doc can go a long way. In the end, it's all about collaboration, and this is how great parties become unforgettable. And with that said, I wanted to pass it to Ayushi, who will talk us through a project and how we work across time zones. Thank you.
Amazing. That was wonderful. Thanks, Elia. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about the audio player that I worked with. But before I get into the details of it, and taking from the discussion around events, and setting a bit of context of where I come from. So I've been with Condé Nast for about 5 years. And what Luke said about wearing different hats, previously I was with the brand and editorial team, and I was doing a very different job of being an art director. And that was with another market. I was working with the India market. And I moved on to become a product designer because I fell in love with UX and moved to the UK market, and it's been 2 years here. So it's quite interesting to kind of like learn across teams, like how the company kind of functions and what our aims and what our projects kind of look like. And going back to the talk about events, overall the team that I work with, it's called Audio, Video, and Events. So just to give a bit of example about video and events, because I'll be talking mostly about audio today, and it's kind of unfair to all the other work, but I can unfortunately present only one case study. So mostly I work across events like Met Gala, Vogue World, talking about it, I mean, that's kind of going on right now. Then, of course, the New Yorker Festival, just to name a few. We're a team which is a collection of designers, engineers, and product managers, and we work across all brands, collaborating seamlessly with editorial to offer unique and interactive user experiences. So let's take a step back to something I encountered recently while I was scrolling through Instagram, because, yeah, I mean, I do spend a lot of time there. So did you know the average human attention span right now is just 8 seconds? And just to give it a bit of comparison, if we compare that to a goldfish score, that would be 9 seconds. So this insight shows how tough it is to grab and keep attention in today's digital world. In the current media landscape, digital audio is key for engaging both businesses and users. Keeping this in mind, our audio experience is giving readers a new way to interact with our brands. The main ask for this project was, how can we make a unique and exciting audio solution for our web experience that boosts engagement and offers a fresh way to enjoy our content? So we went back to the drawing board, and to kick off the design process, we closely collaborated with various teams at different touch points in our product journey. We took a little helping hand from the New Yorker app design team to learn from their experience in building strong audio features on the app. We got inspo of what we were envisioning as a web experience and tied it back to the overall design system utilized for the app. Also, to make the product an agnostic solution, we collaborated with other design teams, taking insights from brands leading the conversation around audio, like Vanity Fair. Of course, product management was like the skeleton driving force behind the whole project. They helped shape the brief and became a bridge between all stakeholders and us, providing us competitor analysis, great industrial insights, and overall kept track of the timelines. The engineering team that helped in bringing our designs to life, assisting with QA, taking feedback from us, testing the product for bug fixes, and well, testing it some more. And as Elia pointed out, the content design team that was always there to assist us with copy tweaks, because we all know words have the power to make or break a design. And of course, editorial, who would have to navigate the audio dashboard, customize content to their audience needs, and give us feedback and bits to improve in future iterations of the player. Now, to give a bit more context of the time zones that came into play to bring this product to life, let's start with where we're working, which is London. Rest of the designers, as well as my manager, are located in Italy and India, making cross-collaboration across time zones and everyday reality. Product management for AVE happens from Spain, adding another location to our cross-collab folio. It gets even more interesting with engineering spaced out across continents, located in countries like Italy, Spain, India, and the US, and facilitating cross-functional collaboration on not just audio work, but implementing advice and learnings from video and vice versa. And of course, the stakeholders that range from brand designers to editorial to product designers from different verticals that are pretty much based across the world. The brief, research, mapping, and feedback from various teams provided a comprehensive 360-degree approach to the project. Collaboration being the key driver of success enabled us to develop a holistic solution while fostering valuable learning experiences from one another. Now, talking about the audio player that we created, it has two components, borrowing elements from one another, namely being the podcast player and the narrated audio player. Starting with the podcast player, here's an example of how we basically went from an experience that looked like this, or maybe we didn't have an audio player in this case, to something like this, where the audio player could host a combination of either single episodes, podcasts, or a full series in the form of a playlist. And here it was quite interesting because even though, like I said, it was an agnostic product that we developed, we had to also consider brand identity elements specific to each brand and kind of have that flexibility to like change things around in the design that would suit each brand identity, and look at the fact that if the typeface selection was right, and if what these decisions were in an agnostic scenario, were they suiting each of those 20 plus brands that we were looking at. And also looking at the narrated audio player, which looked something like this, went on to look. I mean, of course, this is something that is still being worked upon, and this is literally the V1 of the player, but we tried to create something which is more of a seamless plugin to the overall reading, or should I say listening experience of the user. The idea here was to not overwhelm the user with too much going on in the page, because they're basically going through an article, and we wanted to reduce the noise, but at the same time, give the user the choice that they could interact with the article in a different way. And also visually, we didn't want the player to like take away from the overall experience of the page. Talking about the process, this was almost like tennis. I mean, we kind of went back and forth between mapping, wireframing, and numerous rounds of feedback and iterations, making and breaking patterns of how a sprint generally looks like, and just giving some example here was like when we were working on the narrated audio player, while the podcast player was already in dev, we kind of went back to mapping and trying to understand, okay, maybe this functionality could work for the narrated audio player, or hang on, something that we added in podcast player might not be needed anymore. So it was almost like going back and forth between the two designs, and it was a little different from like the conventional way of, completing the design, handing it over to dev, and then kind of like getting along with the QA process. So that was quite interesting and unique about the project. And finally, this is what the product looked like. And we also acknowledge that this is just the beginning of what the offering looks like, because this is fairly, I would say, like audio is quite new in that scenario, that we have developed the V1 of the player, and as we are discussing, we're working on the future iterations of the player. So the takeaways from the project, apart from, of course, achieving significant upliftment and engagement, if I can summarize key pointers here, were, first one being, with teams located in different parts of the world, it's easier to make the most of the golden hour by working together effortlessly across different time zones. Secondly, collaboration should happen at every step, with ideas and insights welcomed from everyone. It was quite interesting how our project management team was like really passionate about audio, and there were times that a lot of ideas of features to put in or like take out of the player came from their end, and also with dev being like really involved in the project, even on the design front, was able to help us with like, figuring out ways how, if we were not able to do certain things because there were certain constraints to the project, they helped us out in ways or examples how we could like figure out a solution which works for everyone. And of course, like I said before, we made sure to test the product extensively to ensure it's the best it can be. Lastly, don't hesitate to strategize for the future and design for upcoming versions while working within constraints and remembering that the product is always a work in progress. And this is something very interesting, because when we're thinking of, the brief at hand, we always think of like, what is the next step I want to achieve, rather than thinking, okay, 10 steps ahead, this is where the product is eventually gonna go. So in a way, maybe right now there are certain limitations that I can't achieve from a design perspective, but I need to think of, there will be a day when, we'll be at, let's say, V10 of the project, what would that look like? And I don't want to be in a place that I did not think this through, that what are those features that could come up at that point. So I mean, it's best to treat the product as a work in progress always. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Madi, who will talk more about working across disciplines and collaborating when teams have different priorities.
Thank you. Thanks, Ayushi. And hi, everyone. I'm Madi. I'm a content designer. I'm going to talk a bit about what I learned about collaborating through redesigning the information architecture, IA, not AI. I always trip up when I try to use the acronym for that, for Epicurious. Wrong way, sorry. So Epicurious, if you're not familiar, is a home cooking and recipe resource. It lists over 50,000 recipes across both an app and a website. And when I started working on Epicurious, we had a sort of inkling of a problem through past research and data, but we hadn't quite figured out how to articulate it yet. And we landed on this, that it's difficult for our subscribers to find the right recipe on our site. But to get there, we had to identify our stakeholders and collaborators and get them in the room so we could talk about what it was that the problem was. And as a content designer, my closest collaborator is usually the product designer, as we work together to design the experience. And we rely on user research so that we can better understand our user needs. Product management, who will shape the brief and manage delivery. There's information management in this case, because we want to understand what the site taxonomy is. Commercial, to ensure that any changes we make aren't impacting their advertising packages. Editorial, to design the IA and the content strategy in tandem. And finally, engineering, who bring our vision to life. And they all contributed to this problem statement, and they each brought a unique perspective to it as well. So as designers, we might most often be focused on the user aspect of the problem. So how do we meet our users' needs and expectations, in this case by minimizing the time and effort it takes for someone to find a recipe. But a product manager might be more concerned with sort of bigger picture objectives and constraints. In this case, we needed to use an existing component. We didn't have the engineering resource to build something from scratch. And whilst editorial, they'll want to publish the best recipes that are coming out of our test kitchen. So it's important at the start of a project to not only identify these folks, but also to include them really early so that we can align on a project's goals and then create a hypothesis we want to test together. And for us, we wanted to test if introducing collections of recipes to our site navigation will make it easier for subscribers to find the right recipes that match the ingredients, time, and preferences they're cooking with. So we have a problem statement and we have a hypothesis we'd like to test. And generally there's alignment this far, but how do we get from the blank page to the final design? And the design process can be really winding and complex. We've kind of heard a lot about that today. And sharing our work with others can be just as complicated, especially when there's so many stakeholders that you have to work with. We don't always move forward. Sometimes we take a step back or we get feedback late. We find an unexpected constraint. But sometimes it's this like circling and backtracking that gets us to like a simpler and clearer solution than we would have had before. And taking our collaborators along for the journey is easier when you share early, often, and with intent. And it's this intent part that's really important because it can be quite uncomfortable to share things when there's a lot of uncertainty. And intent sort of puts boundaries around a discussion, even if they're temporary. And it helps us to identify key questions that we want to answer together. Like, how are editors curating recipe collections? In order to answer that, I need to work with editorial. Otherwise, I might produce a design for the IA based on totally wrong assumptions. And it was essential to better understand what the triggers are for our subscribers and people generally when they're looking for recipes. And that's something I can work with research to better understand. And once I had more of an understanding of the answers to these sort of first two questions, I can begin to design how we connect our content offering to our users' needs and guide the project really with that sort of front of mind. So we have alignment on the problem and our hypothesis, the key questions that are guiding the project, but then what? And when you're working across departments, the people you're collaborating with will inevitably have different priorities and objectives. And it's important to ensure that there's momentum sustained throughout a project and that your communication is kind of kept up. And I did this in part by inviting key stakeholders and individuals to specific workshops and sharing sessions, as opposed to just sort of an outright expectation that everyone come to everything. And alongside these sessions, I documented our progress, inviting feedback early and often through collaborative environments in things like Figma, but also shared docs. And this allowed us to sort of chip away at the work and get the feedback we needed asynchronously, which wouldn't have been possible if we had required attendance at every meeting, especially as you've heard with Ayushi's case, that we can often be working at different times. And so finding time to work together is really challenging. And in the end, our solution introduced a mega menu to the site navigation, which allowed us to sort of strategically uplift recipes in groupings that our users expect, like seasonal recipes or by ingredient. And this was only possible through the close collaboration of teams across disciplines. So when starting a project, I really like to keep this sort of at the front of my mind, and that's to share early, often, and with intent. It's really easy to assume that bringing others in will slow things down, but inevitably you'll find that you dodge sort of getting something unexpected at the end when you're too far gone to sort of adjust And it also helps to build trust with people that you'll inevitably be working with again. So when in doubt, share it out. And I'll hand back to Luke to wrap things up.
Thank you, Madi. Just going to slide this over real smooth. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly summarize essentially some of the key points that we've seen today in these 3 case studies. So essentially, get the stakeholders involved in the process early and don't underestimate your toolkit. So get them involved early, get them singing from the same hymn sheet. That means you can work at pace and efficiently, which obviously, as we saw in Elia's time-sensitive project, GQ Man of the Year is crucial. Also, don't underestimate your toolkit. As we saw, a Google Doc was a fantastic way to get the ball rolling as opposed to excessively complicated processes. Find the middle ground and lean into the constraints. So collaboration naturally means compromise. You can see it when we have multiple brands where you have to consider the nuances and you have to remove certain features that might not fit that brand or add them back in, or new features depending on the brand you're working on. As Madi mentioned earlier as well, just lean into the constraints. It minimizes basically the chance of coming across issues down the line. So do it early and you won't basically encounter issues. Third, basically make the time zone challenges work to your favor. Work smarter, not harder. We heard about the golden hour, that small sliver of time where we're all working together and can work synchronously. But you're leaving the office in Bangalore, great. Pass it over to your colleague in America who's a full working day ahead. It stretches out the day way beyond an 8-hour day. You get more done. Then essentially fostering ongoing collaboration. So it's not just a one and done. Don't just look for feedback at the end of the project. Get it at the start. Engage with stakeholders that may have done similar projects and have expertise you can lean on. Equally, encourage that sense of collaboration throughout, because ultimately as well, collectively, you can help execute the future vision that you have. Because as mentioned in Ayushi's project, most of these things are iterative and an ongoing work in progress in some capacity. And finally, share often and early, and if in doubt, share it out. So as mentioned, use your colleagues as springboards as well. If you're not sure about the actual designs and the concepts, they have other specialisms that you can rely on as well. It gets everyone on the same page, and again, it just mitigates the chance for any errors to occur. So, and again, just to kind of close out, remember, none of us is as smart as all of us. I'd like to say on behalf of my colleagues and I today, I'd like to just say thank you so much for listening.